So thanks again, everyone. Welcome. Again, my name is Catherine Honey. I am with Safeguard Global. I am joining you today as the moderator of today's session, and really pleased that you're able to join us. I think we have a really interesting conversation to come up today. The topic of the conversation is using analytics to manage your payroll data and really get the most intelligence out of it. We're joined by and will be facilitated by some real strong industry leaders and experts, and I'll let them do their own introductions in a second. But we're being led by Tracy Micciche and Kelley Rousayne from the Hackett Group, and joined by Neil Carpenter and Tristan Woods of Safeguard Global. So I'll turn it over to each of them to do a brief intro, if you would. So Kelley, I'll start with you.
Well, if Kelley's a little bit busy, I can start.
Tracy, we'll start with you.
I've been in the industry for over 20 years now, and so I've done HRIS implementations, full global payroll implementations. I've run global payroll operations. I've worked with some of the biggest and best companies, all over the globe. This is, so we're very happy to be here today to be able to bring Kelley.
Sorry about that. So good afternoon, Kelley Rousayne, Global Time to Pay Practice Advisory Leader here at the Hackett Group. So my primary responsibility is helping payroll organizations with advice on payroll strategy through our RP and our best practices. So excited to be here with you today as well.
Great, thank you both. And Neil and Tristan, quick intro.
I'll go first. Neil Carpenter here. I've been in the industry over 20 years in multi-country global payroll services for around 15. Been with Safeguard since the inception. Had many hats in that organization, from general manager to SVP, running payroll operations, implementation, marketing, channels, alliances, sales, etc. So in today's world, I'm currently the EVP of Sales and Channels for Safeguard. Looking forward to this session.
And good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tristan Woods. Been with Safeguard 13 years in the payroll industry, domestically and internationally, for coming on 20, and I run product management and technology development here at Safeguard. Very excited and spend a lot of time helping customers navigate some of their challenges and learn from them. That helps shape our overall product strategy. Great to be here.
Great, thank you all. And just by way of introduction, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Catherine Honey with Safeguard Global. I'm the VP of Strategic Partner Relationships, and my role is to bring great groups like this together. So with that, I'll go on mute and hand it over to Kelley and Tracy to lead us through the webinar.
Thank you so much. So today we're going to talk about global payroll analytics and how to get the most from your data. As Tracy and I will tell you throughout this presentation, we are seeing a high increase in need and want and strategy for analytics, and how payroll is one of the highest controllables that we have in our organization, but yet we're not using that data to our advantage. We're seeing that it's in a lot of different systems, whether it's through payroll systems, multiple HR systems, and workforce management systems. And there's really not a global strategy that's really enabling companies to take that time, data, and payroll information and pull that in and make it so that you can have a competitive advantage by using more predictive analytics versus your historical view of data. And so we're going to talk about various things throughout this presentation that show why companies should be looking at their overall strategy and how you can come to do that.
I think it's actually been that people have been using this. We like to be the champion. I mean, of kind of leading the way, the charge. So we find, most companies don't have a global payroll strategy. They go and implement their global payroll systems, they're not actually designing with the end in mind. So they're looking to move it over and looking to pay people, but they haven't thought about beyond the basic payroll needs. And so oftentimes they find it challenging to be able to get the data out of the system, being able to match the data across countries the way that they need to be able to really look at what they're doing. And then, for those who haven't centralized their payroll, there's no central reporting tool. There's lack of skill set within the organization, even if they do. So you have to have a different view and different lens if you're going to be analyzing the data, because you have to be able to not just look at the data, but understand what the data means and what action needs to be taken. And oftentimes people don't know enough about the business to be able to take that next leap. And, at the end of the day, what we want to see more organizations is having a data analytics strategy, having a way to actually use this, being more of an advisor to the rest of the business. Hey, we're seeing this trend. Hey, we're looking at all of this data, and we can predict that you're going to have a problem here. We're seeing an uptick in overtime. Maybe now you should be thinking about hiring somebody. Is this just, So working with finance and the business and all the other groups is really where we want to see companies moving towards, because there is a real ROI for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I saw and I thought was pretty shocking when we took our quick poll is that 54% of organizations don't even have a strategy around this, haven't thought about it. They're just so in the weeds with the day-to-day processing and maybe not having those right payroll strategies in place to be able to even enable their analytics. So I know COVID has really brought that to the front. We're hearing a lot from our payroll leaders saying, our CEOs, our executive teams are looking for HR and payroll numbers as they're going through some of these crises, and they're not able to make real-time and quick decisions. So this is really going to be a game changer for those who start to look at their strategy and start building on that here in the future. Great points. So some of the barriers, or the benefits, should I say, of achieving with payroll analytics is just really improved accuracy rates. We're seeing increased compliance risk, timeliness, right? A lot of those things around the standard metrics that we track today. But Tracy, what are some of the things that you're seeing analytics being used for that can really bring the competitive advantage that may not be listed here on this page?
I think the biggest thing is really being able to control costs before it actually, not waiting until the end of the month till it hits the general ledger to be able to pivot, and being able to trend, so building those executive dashboards so that they have into what's actually going on, and being more proactive rather than reactive. I just think that I can't emphasize how much, because if you wait until after the end of the month is all over, you've already hit the general ledger, it may be several weeks, the trends continue to go on rather than actually taking corrective action sooner.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely what I'm seeing as well. And so let's take a look at the different stages. I really like this view because it talks about how you run the business versus how you transform the. And so I think a lot of us spend time in that more of the run the business, right? What happened? Why did it happen? I'm looking in my individual, payroll system for analytics. I'm looking separately in my workforce system or my HCM system. It's not a global view, but I can drill down and figure out why my costs happen. So exactly what you were just talking about a moment ago, you can see why the historical costs have happened, but not necessarily how you're going to predict and stop that overtime cost from happening over time. And so I think we see that quite a bit within payroll. And so when we're talking about competitive advantage, we're really talking about this transform the business, the more predictive and prescriptive look at what you can do through analytics. Tracy, how have you seen other companies maybe do that more prescriptive view?
I think, once you get used to, you have enough data, so you have maybe 6 months to a year, you can start to see where things are happening and you start to notice trends. So I think, one, you can, like the overtime example, as you start to see that it's ticking upwards, reaching out to the business to say, hey, why is the overtime? It seems like we're on a trend. We're continually seeing more and more overtime. Is this planned or is this unplanned? So things like that. So being there and seeing that the next month is probably going to be the same. So it's really, and then also too, you may see, like if you have a year's of data, you can see like, okay, the day after the Super Bowl in the US, we see a lot of people calling out sick, or we can kind of predict that next year that probably we're going to have a little bit of, we're going to have a problem for that. So either overstaffing or taking some corrective action so that this is not a problem for the next year.
And I think that's a great point about how you predict what's going to happen, right? So when we're looking at our scheduling, and we know we can predict through AI that we maybe have a big concert coming into town or a big event that's going to happen that maybe hasn't been in our city before but has been in another city. You can actually use some of the AI and analytics to do predictive modeling and forecasting. So that way you can make sure you have the right people scheduled at the right time. And you can also use it for forecasting, in manufacturing. When are your sales higher? Is it higher towards the holiday season? And do you need a hire for that? So I think we're starting to see a lot more payroll teams pulling in information from finance, HR, and other areas within the organization, and really having good partnerships and with their key stakeholders to even dig deeper into what they can do with the predictive and prescriptive analysis.
I would say also, in addition to that, like things like, when do we think that we're going to have churn? When do we expect that there's somebody? What are the key things that people are doing that may that indicate that they're thinking about leaving the company? And so if they're a key resource, you want to make sure that you get ahead of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I
think one of the things.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, improving the accuracy rates, that's something that payroll does really, really well. I mean, we have been using that for years and years. And, as we have more data, as we have better systems, we're able to do that better. I think that's built into payroll's DNA. Compliance, also something that we usually do really, really well. Most companies are on top of that, at least from, when you have a structured environment and we've got kind of centralization, looking at the understanding what compliance rules are, making sure that you pay your taxes on time. Most companies do this pretty well. There may be some changes in the tax rules, may throw us for a loop or whatever, but generally that's not what I'm brought in for. Where we kind of I think struggle a little bit is more the financial cost analysis. That's not really our focus. We have some of that built in, but we're not really helping the rest of the business. We're not working across the partnering with other parts of the organization. We're not really doing the overtime analysis. Not usually. That's something that's usually done. We let the business units handle that usually. And then, as far as like being able to get ahead of the off cycles, I mean, those are so expensive. Some of those things are legally driven, but some of those other ones are not. It's something too. So, and Kelley, you want to go through kind of what that looks like?
Sure. So here's what we're seeing is the current use of predictive analytics, right? So we're seeing a lot around the payroll spend, budgeting, recruiting, employee utilization, retention, and scheduling. And as you can see in a lot of these areas, this is where we were talking about needing to pull in information from other areas of the organization. And so what we're seeing is payroll spend is a good look at the operations, right? This is a more operational type metric, where there could be scheduling the right people at the right time. It could be scheduling a resource with the right wage level at the right time versus a more expensive employee type. And it could just really be around, the focus of reduction of overtime. Some overtime may be good because it's increasing your revenue, and some overtime is bad because it's a waste of time, whether that's walking time or, punching in a clock or punching out late. And so predictive analytics can help you really take a look at that. And we're really seeing a lot of clients moving towards this or planning to implement it here in the next 12 months. It can also help with your budgeting, right? Do you need to budget more for recruiting based on what your future sales are? Well, what if your sales are going up or your sales are going down, especially in a world of COVID where things are very unpredictable right now, and we need to be able to use modeling to help with our budgets. Do we have people on furlough? Do we need to bring them back for furlough? What does that look like for our payroll organizations? And so this is really where you need to start focusing on how you can better use your analytics data, but also partnering with your stakeholders in both the HR and the finance teams, regardless of where you report through, right? So we take a look at recruiting. So what are those costs? How are you, overworking someone? Is someone working too much? Do you think the burn rate's going to be high? Are we going to need to staff additionally? And employee utilization. So taking a look at your overall productivity. Are you going to have enough hours in the future prediction to need and meet full-time predictability for your employees? Are they managing around 40 hours? Are they managing around 31 hours, but you're paying benefits? What are some of those productivity pieces that you can take a look at? And obviously retention, right? So based on different schedule types and shifts and the different processes that go within the scheduling and availability, are you able to retain your employees? And is there a correlation with retention in comparison to punches and time worked and days worked? If you have weekend or night workers, are you having a higher turnover rate there? And is there a reason for that within your payroll data? So again, that's an area where you can partner with HR. And then there's scheduling, and there's so much that organizations can do with advanced scheduling automation, right? Really taking a look at your budget, your forecast, the events within a city or the events within your sales stream, and how those can predict when people are scheduled, how people are scheduled, how breaks are then scheduled. And when you really start to use your analytics and your data, you can get to having the right person at the right time. And so we're really urging companies to take more of a holistic look of where their data is, what data they have, is that data usable, and how do they partner with like a center of excellence or analytics skilled employees to be able to better utilize this data. And I really like the next slide. I think, Tracy, this one, is one that you show quite often when you talk about the foundation of analytics.
Yeah, I think the thing is, like I said, a lot of clients are more, when they go to a global payroll, system, they're really just focused on actually getting people paid. And what we try to push clients to doing is taking a month up front to actually plan the implementation and actually understand and design, not just do a lift and shift. So the starting part of this is categorization. Like, what categories do you want to be able to look at? So think of design with the end in mind. So think about what it is that you're going to want to get out of the reporting capabilities. And that doesn't mean just what payroll wants, but that should also be some of the things that the business wants. So partnering with the rest of the business, because payroll is the only place where you see the full compensation. Tracks certain things that they're doing, but they don't see how much overtime, all the the spot bonuses, all these other things. So we're the only place that you can go to get that. So that's where we would start with. And then harmonization. As you're going through, putting all of your earnings and deduction codes and matching like for like, across countries, so that there is a common language, across the business. This also will help you with your interfaces and some of the other things too, on the other side. Then, if you start to go, if accounting moves to a global accounting system, well, great, because now you have one standard set of codes, and then, it's easier for them to map. The business times are going to require some education, because there's operational business needs, but then there's also strategic business needs. They don't know what you have necessarily. They don't know what you can do. So working with them and understanding, because creating meaningful dashboards that actually do something, that actually help them take corrective action, you'll get the ROI out of this if this is done correctly. It's a little challenging to do, so so I think some clients are doing it like in stages. So they may take a group, get kind of the metrics that they want, make sure that they have the right data, rolling out to the business in kind of slower and smaller groups. That way they can tweak it and then kind of get it and then roll it out on a global scale. At the end of the day, any meaningful report or analytics that we do should drive some sort of action, or should be an indicator of the health of the business, or or give them some kind of knowledge to make better business decisions. If it's not driving those things, then it's not really doing what you want it to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? You need to have really, really strong training and change management around your analytics process, because you can put out the prettiest reports with the best data, but if it is not actionable or understood, it's going to be completely ignored. And sadly, we've seen that happen too often, where you're producing all these reports that could really help the organization, but nobody's using them. So here are just some questions regarding each phase of the analytics. We wanted to provide this to you. Obviously, there's a lot of words on this slide, but what we want you to take away from this is it's not just about, your payroll accuracy and your payroll metrics that you're recording today. You should really take a look at the operational strategy, staffing strategy, customer experience, and the employee experience. And you can really move the questions that you can answer from very basic descriptive of what happens to why did it happen, what could happen, and how do we make it happen, right? If we do X, will Y occur, right? And okay, let's go ahead and do X, and did it happen? Were we able to increase sales because we had the right people staffed at the right time? Were we able to meet the needs of the organization by having hiring done on time and training and having people out in front of our clients and customers on time, because we were able to predict that we needed different staffing levels and different skills to meet future needs of the organization? Are we really taking a look at employee experience? Are we making sure we have the right staffing so that we're providing the right client levels? Call centers do this a lot. Do we have the right staffing on a particular day based on how many calls we expect to receive? And how does that impact our customer service responses, average speed of answer? I mean, we see this in manufacturing, hospitality, restaurants, call centers. This is a really important one to make sure we have what we need at the right time. And then also your employee experience. So you're able to then take a look at, what's burning out employees. Are they working too much overtime? Or do you have them below your minimum hours that they need for their benefits? Is the scheduling being fair and spread across the staff as needed? Are you putting people in the right roles at the right time? And so these are really just important pieces that you can continue to build on if you have the data built in and you're doing the analytics. But again, going back to the point Tracy made before, you can provide a dashboard that predicts all of this, but it has to be actionable. It has to be understood by the leaders so that they can go ahead and ensure that you're getting the outcomes that you're expecting.
Yeah, because I think also too, and especially if you combine like some of the HR, the manufacturing, like you combine all of the data. So one of the things that we've been talking about is creating the kind of COE of data analytics to really drive home some of these things. And also too, like things like, do you have a bad manager? So you can even, if you see like a lot of turnover with a particular person, maybe that manager, that's indication that there's something going on with that particular manager. So those are the types of things that you can be doing. And then, as you get, it's going to take a little while, at first you're probably going to have to be flexible and agile with the model, because you might not have quite the right metrics at first. You might have to do a little bit more training and tweaking. But then as you start to go through this, you're going to get really good at this. And this is going to make payroll a lot more strategic than it is currently today.
Absolutely.
So I think one of the things too, people have kind of looked at dashboards as just being something for executives, and that's really kind of a narrow view. Executives and managers, we see having dashboards. People out in the field are so busy. So if you want them to do something, you've got to make it simple and easy. And it's not their main job. So we want to make sure that whatever we send them, that they have, that's a quick view, they can actually take some corrective action and go forward, like all on the mobile or tablet. Don't have to be sitting in front of the computer. But really what we want to see is, getting even employees should kind of know where they are, maybe have some warnings about I don't know, benefits enrollment is coming up or something along those lines. We'd like to, pushing it out to line managers, employees will actually increase the success, assuming you have the right training and the right change management approach.
Right. And I think the biggest thing too here is the same metrics are not going to be on all of these dashboards. So it's not a one size fits all. What you're going to send to your executive team is going to be very high level. And what you're going to send to a line manager is going to be more detailed with very easily explained actionable steps, right? And so you definitely want to take a look at your audience when you're building those scorecards and make sure that those metrics are meaningful for that employee group. So what are some of the barriers? Really, what we're seeing here is, a lot of payroll systems, right? So the more payroll systems you have, it does make this more difficult. Not impossible, but it's definitely more difficult, based on the categorization and the harmonization that Tracy spoke about earlier. We're really seeing a lot of competing priorities, right? Right now, we're focused on, finance and global HCMs. And maybe not as much on the payroll side. And we've also seen that COVID's put a lot of strain on budgets this year. A lot of projects have been delayed or put on hold temporarily because of other priorities that need to be taken care of, whether it's just, understanding the COVID compliance and getting people paid. The poor data, again, this goes back to having a lot of disparate systems and really just tying your global analytics strategy to your global payroll strategy and making sure that you have that. And a lot of times we'll see resourcing. So those who have a center of excellence where you can tap into some of those core skilled resources, they may also be doing analytic strategies for others within the organization. So the finance teams, the HR teams, IT teams may be kind of higher up on the priority list. So what you want to do as part of doing your business case is talking about the ROI and the importance of using the payroll data and what you can do for not just the payroll department, but for the overall organization. Because remember, payroll is the highest cost. So if you can get some of the overtime costs down, that's not just benefiting, payroll, it's benefiting the end-to-end organization, and really working with your executive teams to get support to do that. Tracy, I'm going to move into the recommendations here.
Okay. So I think our first recommendation is develop a global payroll strategy. So understand where the needs of the business, because you have to have the right foundation in order for this to work. If you don't have, if you have too many systems, it's going to be too hard to actually implement this. So having a global system or repository to collect all of your payroll data so that you can actually do this analysis. And like I said, kind of before, make sure that you're harmonizing that stuff as you're implementing it. Partnering with internal stakeholders. This is never going to work if you're not partnering with the internal stakeholders and they have buy-in. So you have to have the right executive buy-in across the business, across HR, to make sure that they are committed to helping you make this successful, because this is going to be a new way of doing business that they're not used to. In some cases, you may get some resistance. They may not understand how to actually apply it, and then also kind of fear of change, fear of the unknown. So it's probably want to start with kind of some champions and work with them to kind of develop the model, people that are going to help you with understanding what they need. Leverage vendors' analytic capabilities. So as you're looking, out for a global payroll solution, make sure they have the correct analytic capabilities and are able to actually drive some of the things and maybe help you build some of these dashboards that you're looking for, because I think that's one of the things that partnering is going to be really, really important. And even if you're not using their system to actually do the gross to net, can you pull in some of the other, some of your other payrolls that you might be doing in-house or with another vendor? That way you have a global look and one view of the world. Create payroll data governance teams. So you want to make sure that you've got finance, HR, and the business kind of all aligning on what data is important and understanding what in the business changes. So what's important today may not be important, 6-12 months from now. So this is going to have to be able to evolve after you've set this up. So continually working with them, because whatever the data that you started with may have been important at the time, but now that problem's been resolved. Now we need to look at something different. Identify key performance metrics, making sure that you are measuring yourself and that you're actually getting what you wanted out of the program. If not, you need to stop and look. Otherwise, what'll happen is a year will pass and they'll say, like, this was a waste of time. We didn't get what we needed. Well, no, if you're measuring yourself, then you'll know that you may need to tweak with the program ahead of time rather than waiting until the end. Data needs. So again, as this thing, when you set it up, your data needs are going to be, X. I guarantee you that there'll be additional data needs as the program starts to grow. People see that it's useful. You may end up having to bring in additional data in order to get some of the additional metrics that you want, or maybe tying into other systems. So looking at, for instance, the orders or, some of the financial systems to be able to combine some of these things so that you really get the full picture. Number 7. Well, if you don't have the right skills, and I guarantee you that most payroll departments maybe have 1 or 2 people that might fit the bill, but most of us haven't hired for these types of skills in the past. So looking at how you're going to create a culture of data analytics and process improvement is something that you're going to have to hire for, most likely. And then the last part is develop a realistic roadmap. Don't try to take on the world when you first start this. You want to have some success. So start a little bit small, get this, where you want it, and you feel like it's actually working, then you can roll it out to others. Because if you try to do everything all at once, you're going to overwhelm yourself. You're going to have competing priorities, and then and if it's not successful immediately, you're also going to get negative feedback, and you're not going to get the adoption that you need in order to make this successful.
Yeah, that's a great point. And as you're building your roadmap, making sure that you're getting those, key stakeholders, your internal stakeholders, and your vendors involved with that, so that you're including things that are on their roadmap as well, across the line. Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and move into our panel discussion. So I wanted to go ahead and ask both Tristan and Neil to give us our brief view of what we've discussed here so far. So Tristan, why don't we go ahead and start with you?
Yeah, thanks, Kelley. I think it's very interesting. I think it's great that you guys have been able to conduct the research that actually gets to the some of the data around some of the challenges that companies have been facing and what the sort of general industry trends are. And I think it's representative of what we see amongst our customers and talking to people in the market all the time. And it's I think for me it's one of these areas that companies really need to sort of continue to look at, leverage, and determine how to derive the best value from this. Because if you think about, labor spend is just such a significant part of any company's overall, expense. And it's not even just payroll expenses, it's the contract, the contingent labor, it's all the other people related expenses that you have, and how to really kind of get value from that data and then continue, as you said, to kind of refine how you're using it so that you get real commercial benefit from it is what's really important to me and to us, because it's on one level, it's about helping practitioners in payroll and HR understand these costs, but it's more about how do you help the business run a better business? How do you amend and adjust your strategy based on the things you can learn about people expenses? So it's always a fascinating topic, and hopefully been interesting for everybody else who's been listening. Neil, anything else to add?
Yeah, just to say exactly the same as you, really. But the thing that I really took from this, which I would take as a key takeaway from the session, because we see it all the time as well, is really the foundation for success. Categorize, harmonize business needs and meaningful reports to the analytics. I think it's really important to take those steps, because I think everyone wants to get to the analytic component, and you can jump there really quickly. But I think taking the steps to work with different departments in your organization, because although this can be just related to payroll, as Tristan rightly mentioned, and Tracy and Kelley mentioned, the operating cost can generally be the biggest cost for any organization. So getting the buy-in from different departments and really understanding what they're looking for out of these operating costs and what data would be really impactful for them to make better decisions. I think that was a really good point mentioned in the session that I'd take away if I was looking at analytics for the first time, for sure.
Yeah, Neil, I think that's great. And so, just to kind of expand on that a little bit, when you're talking to companies, how do you discuss how they should really think about analytics as a tool within their organization?
Yeah, sure. So, excuse me. So I think they need to look at it not just from a payroll perspective, think more broadly. The way that we see organizations using pay data is really making bigger impacts and broader impacts, not just for the payroll team, but for the different departments. So I'll give you a few examples. We've seen organizations that have built out charts within their analytical dashboards, which show sort of employer costs, attributing also to benefit costs of regions that they're not actually present in. Now, what that means is they are becoming the payroll department that's being a strategic component to the sales business, because for that organization, they're bidding on projects around the world, and obviously margins are tight, and they want to ensure that they're factoring in all the additional costs, and obviously, people costs are one of the highest costs that they have. And then other organizations we've actually seen that are heavily focused on project work, actually creating charts within our analytics around their project costs. So ensuring that they're managing to a certain budget by leveraging the payroll data to pull into the project cost, to making sure that they have targets and measures attributed to that. And then obviously the most common one, that everyone's using the analytics for, is because once you've harmonized the data, it's really easy to be able to delve into that information, is your total workforce cost. And over COVID, and over this period of time, we've seen many organizations that are really looking at their operating costs and wanting to understand where they could potentially look to reallocate their workforce. And you made some really great points around overtime, having the visibility to see where there is higher levels of overtime, which is above the threshold, to allow people to become a partner to the, if they sit in finance, become a partner to HR and say, hey, you've got a shortage here that you need to overhire for at the moment, because you're paying, 1.5% more than you should be on your labor costs. But, what I mean by that is you're becoming a strategic partner to the business and to many different departments. And I think that's, the way that we should be looking at analytics when it comes to operating expenses. But we mustn't discount, it does work as a bridge between data and insight, because we've got to remember it's still only a tool. So it's important to work back from the type of questions the organization would like to answer, and then also understand how you interpret that information, and then how you share that information in the organization, because the data is great and it gives great charts and visibility, but you need to maintain that support from different departments to ensure that you're providing the greater value that the analytics can really provide from your department.
Yeah, that's great. I like how you mentioned it's not operational, it's strategic, right? And I know historically payroll hasn't been looked at as a strategic partner, but we've been doing a lot over the last several years to really change that mentality and really become the strategists and how we can help with a lot of this data. So that is a great point. So I think the next question is over to Tristan. Let's see, what has Safeguard seeing as one of the most common uses of analytics or BI within payroll?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we kind of mentioned some of them, but I think if we go back to some of the slides that we were presenting earlier on, it sort of sits within that sort of descriptive and diagnostic segment. So it's looking at the data that relates to payroll transactions, largely down to things like being able to compare, for example, payroll elements and looking at how your earnings and deductions are sort of grouped on an international basis and being able to compare the expense between one country and another. And I think that's key. And it also, how you do that is speaks to some of what Tracy was talking about in terms of laying the foundation for how you're going to get this data into a shape that you can, I kind of like to describe it as you have data, and from data comes information, and information is where the value is. The data is the stuff that helps you kind of convert that into information. So we see a lot of companies that are using it to look at that sort of more transactional parts, but they're also looking at things that are quite interesting, because most of our customers, for example, and a lot of companies who've invested in BI or analytics tools have, for example, global HCM systems. But the number of times that we see headcount reporting for payroll being run against within our suite is quite interesting, because you would expect perhaps that goes through HR. So that either means that payroll professionals don't have access to headcount reporting within HR, or they're using it for control purposes within their own sort of domains. But it's very interesting just to see the frequency with which headcount analytics is being viewed. And then, as Neil said, really it's around the total labor spend reporting. So when people design these systems in the right way and design the way that the data is going to become accessible, it's not just looking purely at payroll expense, it's looking at these other kind of clusters that can be put together and really made useful. So comparing the cost of your contingent labor or your contractors against your traditional sort of employees is an interesting area. And I think the other thing that we find is that there's professionals in the industry who like to look at data in a sort of more kind of tabular numerical format. But actually, and this speaks to the speed of access to the information that Tracy was speaking about earlier, is giving people the visuals against that data helps them to process it more quickly, helps them to see patterns and trends a lot more easily. So what we see is, while there's capability for both, people looking at the visualizations and then being able to sort of drill into that from kind of global heat maps going into countries, and then comparing one country against the next and looking at social costs to see which one's more expensive, for example. Those are kind of the sort of main themes of what we see within the actual usage amongst our customers.
Yeah, visualization is key. Okay, next question up. Let's see. What are you seeing in the market as being barriers? I know we talked a little bit about the barriers we were seeing, through our polls and our membership. What are some of the barriers that Safeguard is seeing as well?
So, I'll take this one, Tristan. So I think when you look at organizations, technology is the top one, because there's lots of decisions that need to be made around technology, right? So, do you have an existing BI tool today? Are you using a payroll vendor that gives you analytics tools and applications to use? So how many analytic tools can you have, and how do you standardize that? And do you get the support needed from the organization if you're introducing another analytic tool? Now, obviously, that's the one barrier that you have there, is different needs from different departments all looking to get to data. And then two, when you're trying to build it out yourself and you're not necessarily have the expertise, not just from a configuration of the tool, but the knowledge around global pay and global payroll elements. If you're not harmonizing that information or don't have the expertise to do that, then that's a major barrier in itself, because you're not going to get consistent reports that are going to demonstrate value back to the business. And then I think a lack of appreciation of the value. So commitment by organizations to support and fund sort of a multi-tiered project to get the access to data and normalize it and then govern it and then distribute it, almost going back to the foundation of for success that you presented, making it available to all. And then lastly, I think the acceptance by the organization that HR should evolve, to be a strategic partner for the business and not just be a support function. I think we're starting to see that trend, and I expect to see that trend a lot more, because as we talked about, the way that people are using analytics from a payroll cost perspective and from an operating expense line, and how that can be carved up for different departments is massive. I mean, we've seen organizations do a lot of transformation in their own organization by using these analytics.
Yeah, makes sense. Just to kind of dig into that a little bit more, I mean, we know the barriers exist, but why do they exist, and what can we do to mitigate against them?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's continue to educate the market of the value. I think, previously, some organizations see payroll as a transactional function. And I think, really, particularly in this day and age with the technology, I see payroll as really should be sitting at the top table of any organization. And maybe I'm biased because I'm in payroll, but the power of the data that payroll can produce and the analytics that go with it, I think it's around education and making sure that the executives in these organizations really appreciate the value that payroll and the data that payroll produces can really bring to the organization. I mean, and it's going to come from stories, it's going to come from success stories. We've had clients, we've got one client that saved, off the record, he saved over $10 million in reallocation of workforce by utilizing our tool. So it just goes to show that sometimes it pays for itself.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move on to the future of analytics. So where do you see analytics going, and how do you believe it's going to evolve and develop?
I think I'll take that one.
Great.
Sits within my sort of sphere of interest. So I think predominantly a lot of the future around all of this is going to be around artificial intelligence and machine learning. And that is going to take some time to build up, because for AI and machine learning to be truly useful, it's got to have big data sets to crunch against, and a lot of that data available within the technology. So a lot of this is more of a kind of a technical problem, is going, how do you get your historical data into a sort of structure in that harmonized way, but accessible to the technology that's going to be running against that? Because if you look at what AI is actually doing, it's people kind of may mistake analytics and business intelligence with AI, but ultimately AI is around how is it accessing data to go and learn the data, see what the patterns in that data actually is, and then kind of start to figure out the sort of things that you want to know based on how you're interacting with that data, and so on. There's a number of other factors around that as well, but I think it's still very much in its infancy at the moment, because there partly is a technology piece. It's got to evolve, particularly in the sort of HR and payroll functions of companies. But again, it's about having access to that data, because AI is not useful if it doesn't have a big kind of batch of data to be able to go and look at. So companies that are very substantial in terms of headcount, that have got data lakes or data vaults set up that has that data in it, would be really good candidates to go and use AI type features, because they'll have something that the AI can kind of go and figure out and find. But I think definitely that's where the future is. I think that again, something that was mentioned earlier is the sort of skills of people who can go and do that, because as we all know, and kind of around this table, if you like, it's not so much about for us about, or what the problem that payroll has is that there's a lot of stuff within our domain that means things are scenario based. They're not just purely kind of mathematical in the way that the average person perceives payroll to be. And so you can go and get really good data science people, and you can go and get, people who can go and crunch data and figure things out. But how payroll helps those people understand the payroll domain and the nuances of that and why certain things are important and not is, I think, one of those areas that's got to evolve. And I think it will continue to evolve because the marketplace is helping companies to solve some of the problems that they have. As Neil mentioned, getting $10 million worth of savings on labor because of having access to data. You wouldn't have seen that really kind of 5 to 10 years ago. And as Tracy was saying earlier, the speed of access to this information that helps you to be more agile as a business. Agility is the name of, or the word for this year, really, isn't it? It's what's kind of saved a lot of stuff because people have had to get really agile, and that's what's going to affect positively the companies that can do best over the coming years, is those that can respond quickly to change, who can respond quickly to changing dynamics and stuff. And so AI kind of, and access to information really links into all of that. So that's kind of where I see a lot of the future, more at the kind of higher ongoing level than the day-to-day, tactical.
So I think what most are probably wondering on this call is, where do they start? So they're looking at beginning their journey towards analytics for payroll. What should they do?
Yeah, and I think I'll try and sort of take that from where Tracy sort of left off, really, in terms of developing the roadmap. But I think the way we've always liked to look at things is, if you want to create an outcome of something, you've got to sort of start at the end of the process. There's no point talking about tools and technology until you understood what you're trying to get from all of that. And I'm here talking with my hands that you can't see because they keep disappearing. So I'd be sort of starting with, like, when you think about going and presenting information back to your business at different layers, what is it that information is? What's going to help people make better decisions, run their department better, run their function, their business unit, whatever it is, better, that relates to people, costs and labor spend? And then you can start to kind of peel back from there. What is the data that you actually need? Because you can't give somebody this unless you've got all of this up front. And then you have to sort of go back to the beginning of the process and start to figure out, well, where is this data? How are we going to harmonize that data? How are we going to get access to that information to begin with? So creating that sort of harmonization strategy is really, really important in the global space, because it's obviously lots of different payroll systems all over the world makes that piece very difficult to do. And you're going to have to either have a global solution that you can hook into that has done that harmonization, or you're going to say my BI tool or my data lake or my database or whatever is going to have to be the thing that does that harmonization. So that then comes very much into the technology side and the sort of choices of tools that you have. And there's lots of different kind of options around there at the moment, but those are only as good as the data that's structured within it and how you can then get access to that data. So I think, to try and summarize that, is figure out what it is that you're really trying to know now, get your data structure in a way that's going to be flexible enough in the future but gets you to the things that you're trying to look at, and then start to think about the sort of technology that you'll layer over the top. And then, as Tracy said, make sure you've got a kind of maintenance and a longer term roadmap about this, because there's no point in having, just for today's problem. You've got to make sure that this is something that you can continue to use, you can continue to demonstrate the value of it, you can be flexible and agile inside your business. And that's kind of my parting points on kind of how to get started with that. And obviously, you guys at Hackett have got some great expertise on that, and people like Neil and I will talk about this stuff all day long for people that want to get offline advice around this topic.
Great, thank you. Kathy, do we have any more questions in the chat?
We do not have any. We've just asked to share the information with the attendees, which of course we will, and we'll make the recording as well as the materials available on our respective websites as well.
Great.
So any other parting thoughts, Kelley or Tracy, Tris, or Neil?
I think my piece would be to take a look at the recent paper that's posted on the Safeguard website on getting the most value out of your payroll data. It talks about a lot of the things we talked about here, It's a great article that Tracy and I put together. We are doing a lot of research in this space over the next, several months. We are going to see an increase here, and a lot of companies really want to take a look at this data. Tracy, anything to add?
Yeah, it's like I said, just kind of start small. If you need help, we're here to help as well. So if you need want to understand how to put a program like this together, we can certainly help you do that. And it is worth the effort. I'm going to say that.
Yeah, and I'd leave it with you also keep everybody who's listening to this, keep pushing the success stories out there, because that ultimately helps the market. It helps your peers to do a better job with this when you can really demonstrate tangible value in these types of initiatives. So the market needs to hear more about how people are using and how they've got value.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you all very, very much for participating, of course, and for joining. I think it was a fabulous session. Again, we are all available to answer any questions or have conversations. I think we all love to talk about this stuff all the time. And I think, from my own personal experience, just echoing what everybody has said, it really is all about kind of looking at information in a different way and sort of asking the questions and then figuring out how you can get the data and the information to answer those questions at a business level. And that's really, I think, what we've all been saying. It's, let's raise the payroll profession up and make us all more strategic, which I think is the ultimate goal. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate some of the comments that have shown up on the chat side and any ongoing sort of conversations. And Kelley and Tracy, special thanks to you guys. Neil and Tristan, very special thanks to you as well. And to everybody who joined, have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, and evening. Thank you so much.
Take care, everyone.